Some great
Last
save.
time, Good afternoon. I call the meeting of the Community and Public Safety Committee to order. It is Tuesday, November 18th at 2:30 p.m. Diana, will you please call the roll?
Good afternoon. Zimmerman?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Murillo?
Thank you. Here.
Kinnall?
Here. Thanks, Diana. Christopher, will you please read the statement of conduct?
Welcome to the meeting of the Community and Public Safety Committee. To testify before this committee in person or virtually, you must sign up in advance to the committee agenda at www.portland.gov/council/agenda/community-and-public-safety-committee or by calling 311. Information on engaging with the committee can be found at this link. Registration for virtual testimony closes 1 hour prior to the meeting. In-person testifiers must sign up before the agenda item is heard. If public testimony will be taken on an item, individuals may testify for 3 minutes unless the chair states otherwise. Your microphone will be muted when your time is over. The chair preserves order. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or committee deliberations will not be allowed. If you cause a disruption, a warning will be given. Further disruption will result in ejection from the meeting. Anyone who fails to leave once ejected is subject to arrest for trespass. Additionally, the committee may take a short recess and reconvene virtually. Your testimony should address the matter being considered. When testifying, state your name for the record. If you're a lobbyist, identify the organization you represent, and virtual testifiers should unmute themselves when the clerk calls your name. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Colleagues, today we have 3 items on our agenda. We'll be first hearing a presentation from the City Attorney's Office, as well as the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform about the United States versus City of Portland settlement agreement. We'll then have a public hearing to take any testimony from community members regarding that presentation or anything else related to that settlement. And then we will pivot to an item proposed by the mayor, a report to appoint members to the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing and take a decision on whether or not to refer that on to the full council. We will start with the first item. Diana, will you please read it?
Item number 1, United States versus City of Portland settlement agreement updates.
Thank you. Colleagues, the City of Portland has been party to a settlement agreement with the Federal Department of Justice related to constitutional and equitable policing since 2012 as part of Councilor Novick and I scheduling items as a tour of our public safety system. In this committee, we've scheduled today's presentation to give the committee and public more information about the settlement agreement, including its current status. We've invited our city attorney and Reverend Leroy Haynes from the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition to provide a presentation, which is intended to provide an overview of that history, where things stand today. Later today, we'll also be hearing about the role of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing in overseeing the settlement agreement from a community perspective in advance of hearing and voting on item appointments to PSEP later in our agenda. And just as an entry point to this, in 2010, the Albina Ministerial Alliance requested a federal civil rights investigation into the Portland Police Bureau following the killing of Aaron Campbell by a Portland police officer, which was a key impetus for the settlement agreement we still have today, to which the AMA has enhanced amicus status. We're honored to have Reverend Leroy Haynes from the AMA with us here today to share about this history. I believe he's online, and we'll also hear a presentation from Chief Deputy City Attorney Heidi Brown. Reverend Haynes, whenever you're ready.
I'm thankful to be here today to the distinguished members of the Portland City Council and Commissioner on Public Safety. My name is the Reverend Dr. Leroy Haynes Jr., chairperson of the Abana Minister Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. I'm thankful for having this a moment and to give an overview of how we got to where we are now. I come before you today as chairperson of the Abana Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, a coalition that has consistently advocated for police reform in the Portland Police Bureau and in the criminal justice system for the last 2 decades. The Abana Ministerial Alliance Coalition was formed out of 25 coalition partners nearly 2 decades ago in the killing of an African-American woman by the name of Kendra James in May the 5th, 2003. Over 5,000 members of the Portland community of diverse faith, ages, race, united together to call for justice. It was at this time that many community leaders, community organizations, labor, faith houses, and activists felt a need for a broad-based grassroots coalition to address the issue of police using excessive and deadly force against members of the Portland community. The Abana Ministerial Alliance Coalition focused on 5 major goals, which include a federal investigation by the Justice Department to include civil rights violation, as well as a federal audit of the patterns and practice of the Portland Police Bureau. 2, the creation of an independent police citizen review board with the power to compel testimony. 3, a full review of the Bureau excessive force and deadly force policies and training with diverse citizen participation for the purpose of making recommendations for changes in policy and training. 4, to lobby state legislatures to narrow the language of the state statute for deadly force used by police officers. And 5th, to establish a special prosecutor for all excessive and deadly force cases by the police. The Abana Ministerial Alliance Coalition was either the lead and advocate or supportive advocate in a variety of excessive forces cases or deadly force cases, such as Jahad Perez in 2004, James Chassie Jr. in 2006, a 12-year-old girl, a beanbag shooting at TriMet 2009, and Aaron Campbell in 2010, and Keaton Otis in 2010. It was following the killing of an unarmed African-American male in distress of the death of his brother that Aaron Campbell was killed by a Portland police sniper named Frashauer on January 29, 2010. That mass demonstrations broke out in different communities throughout the city of Portland that both the Abana Ministerial Alliance Coalition and city council members at that time, including Mayor Sam Adams, called for a federal investigation of the Aaron Campbell case. But the Abana Ministerial Alliance Coalition took it a step further because federal investigations of shootings were very common. The AMA sent a request to the Department of Justice with the endorsement of the 2 Oregon congressional senators asking for a federal audit of the Portland Police Bureau patterns and practices in the use of excessive and deadly force against communities of color and citizens of the city of Portland. Later, Mayor Sam Adams at that time and Commissioner Dan Salzman endorsed a call for an audit of the police bureau. In spring of 2011, the Department of Justice came back with a report on the Campbell case stating that it found no wrongdoing by a Portland police officer. However, on June 8 in 2011, the Department of Justice announced it would conduct audit of patterns and practices of the Portland Police Bureau. During the summer of 2011, the Department of Justice started interviews community members as well as Portland Police Bureau, community organizations, lawyers, city officials. On September the 13th, 2012, the Department of Justice issued a letter of finding saying patterns and practices of excessive force is used against people with mental illness or perceived to be mentally ill. In November of 2012, the City Council passed an amended settlement agreement. In January 2013, Judge Michael Simon allowed the Portland Police Association, the PPA, to be a party of the lawsuit filed by the Department of Justice and created a new legal precedence by giving the Obama Ministry Alliance Coalition enhanced amicus status, which allowed the coalition as a community organization to be a limited party in the mediation of the settlement agreement. In July 2013, the City Council of Portland accepted the Obama Ministry Alliance Coalition Collaborative Agreement, outlined the AMA Coalition participation in the implementation and the settlement agreement. In February of 2014, Judge Simon conducted a fairness hearing where over 70 persons testified from all walks of life. In August of 2014, Judge Michael Simon entered the settlement agreement into record and called for periodic annual hearings. In October of 2014, the City Council announced its intention to appeal the periodic annual hearing. And so we have today in our present mode the settlement agreement with two new major items to that. One, the passage in a referendum by the members of this great city to create a police oversight board for accountability. And two, we have moved to the monitoring system. Now, those two key items represent one of the greatest historical elements of reforming the Portland Police Bureau in the modern age. And so it is not a panacea. It will not correct all of the issues and the problems with police abuse, the misuse of deadly force, but we believe that it is a major transformation in the Bureau and will continue to be a major transformation for reforming the Portland Police Bureau. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Haynes. I'll welcome up our Deputy City Attorney, Heidi Brown.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Heidi Brown. I'm with the City Attorney's Office. I use she, her pronouns. I started providing legal advice to the city on the DOJ settlement agreement in 2019. and I've been advising and appearing in court on this matter since that time. I'm going to walk you through the settlement agreement up through today, and I'll get into a little more detail on some of the pieces, but I appreciate Dr. Haynes giving some of the background and walking you through an overview of the settlement agreement. The next, thank you, the first PowerPoint slide is just what Dr. Haynes already testified, or excuse me, shared with you. So you can just see it in writing, but I'm going to skip this page since he already covered this. And on the next slide, if we could, the next one. Oh, yeah, so sorry, nope, the one before, apologies. So as Dr. Haynes shared with you all, we entered into, and the court accepted this in 2014. The original terms of the settlement agreement required certain things for the city to meet compliance and for the case to be dismissed. And that was that there were numerous paragraphs in the settlement agreement, and we were required to be in substantial compliance with all paragraphs for 1 year. And substantial compliance simply means that any violations or mishaps are minor or occasional and not pervasive and frequent. And then secondly, after meeting substantial compliance for a 1 year period on all paragraphs, we were then required to maintain that status of substantial compliance on all paragraphs for a subsequent year called a monitoring year. And at the conclusion of that, the parties would request a dismissal of the case. The settlement agreement terms covered the following areas. The first two were just sort of general provisions and definitions, but and each one is referred to as a section. So section 3 was on use of force. There are several paragraphs underneath that, under each of these substantive provisions, if you will. And in the use of force section, I wanted to note that in particular, the DOJ's findings about the excessive uses of force against persons who were either mentally ill or in a mental health crisis was predominantly around the use of tasers. And so the use of force section really did focus, you'll see quite a bit on tasers and use of taser and limitations and accounting for that. Section 4 is on training. Section 5 is on community-based mental health services and really focuses on outside community organizations and how we could, just the city seeking the support of those community organizations and providing services to people who are in need, particularly with mental health crises or are suffering from a mental illness. The next section was on crisis intervention. Then we had a section on the Portland Police Bureau's Employee Information System, also known as EIS. That system, kind of big purpose and for big picture and for purposes of the settlement agreement, looks to see if there are some incidents that are happening with individual officers that might suggest that an officer needs some intervention related to use of force. It serves other purposes, but for the settlement agreement, that was the main interest. Section 8 is on officer accountability, and we'll talk a little bit more. I'll get back into Section 8 toward the end of the presentation. And the last section is on community engagement and the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, also known as PCEP, which previously was under a different name and served a slightly different purpose, but now is the PCEP. On the next slide, we have what Dr. Haynes already covered, where the Portland Police Association was accepted as a third-party intervener. So they are actually a party to the case. And then there were two amici, originally the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, also known as AMAC or AMAC. And they were given a status called Enhanced Amicus, which is a novel stance that they're given, but it is, an amicus is a friend of the court, that status, not actually a party to the case. And then the Mental Health Alliance subsequently also requested amicus status, friend of the court status, and they were granted that as well, although not with the enhanced status like AMAC received. For monitoring of how was the city doing under the original terms of the settlement agreement, we had two bodies, entities that were looking into our compliance. One was the Compliance Officer and Community Liaison, also referred to as the COCL, and they reported quarterly on our compliance with each substantive paragraph of the settlement agreement. And then we also had DOJ. DOJ served in a dual role at that time. They served both as a monitor and as a plaintiff for enforcement purposes. As a monitor, they periodically assess the city's compliance, and the first assessment they performed was in September of 2015, and then they did subsequent ones up until the most recent assessment done by the DOJ in their role as monitor was done in August of 2023, and that was the 7th one. So DOJ did a total of 7 compliance assessments. Then we moved to 2020. In 2020, early 2020, in February, the city was found in substantial compliance with all the substantive paragraphs in the settlement agreement, and then we started our 1-year monitoring period. A month later, in March, COVID happened. This had an impact on the requirements of the settlement agreement, followed by the murder of George Floyd and the resulting almost 6 months of nightly protests and engagement with PPB. And then we also had devastating wildfires. All those 3 things impacted the city's compliance with the settlement agreement. And onto the next slide, as a result of that, at the conclusion, the Department of Justice in 2021 sent the city a letter of concern with non-compliance with the terms of the settlement agreement, and we entered into the informal and then formal resolution process wherein we went to mediation for an extensive period of time and then worked together to come up with amendments to the settlement agreement. And during that mediation process, there was involvement with the third-party intervener and the amici. As a result of that, in 2022, we did bring amendments to the settlement agreement, originally adopted and authorized by council, and then brought to the court. And we added 8 new paragraphs to the settlement agreement. The first one was a relatively easy fix, but there was a concern about capturing edits and completion dates and times in force reports and after-action reviews. So that was established. Then second one was that we had an outside agency that critically assessed the city's response to the 2020 protests, and they made recommendations to the city for changes to hopefully have better results in future protest situations, especially enduring ones. Third is that we agreed to have a separate budget line item for overtime associated with PPB training. So you'll see that at times that it has its own line item within overtime. Third, we agreed to hire a qualified civilian for PPB that has oversight at the training facility in collaboration and working closely with the captain of training without either of them reporting to one another. Next, we agreed that IPR, the Independent Police Review, would investigate Police Bureau lieutenants, captains, commanders, and then everyone in the chief's office, the assistant chiefs, the deputy chief, and the chief, to look at during 2020, was there training of our team members that did not comport, that was allowed to happen but did not comport with policy? Was there direction for uses of force that were excessive or not appropriate uses of force? Were there timely completions of force reports and after-action reviews? And then was there need for clarifications or corrections on the use of force? That investigation is continuing. Next, we agreed to a little minor change on the annual report. We agreed to, on the next slide, thank you, to implement a body-worn camera program, which, as you all know, we do have, which is great. And the last thing we agreed to was to implement the oversight system. And there were 2 components to that. One was that we would propose a plan to help retain IPR employees through that transition to the oversight system. And then secondly, we agreed to adopt an oversight system by a process that we kind of already started on at the point at which the DOJ wanted to include this in the settlement agreement, and by which the court finally entered it, which was that the Police Accountability Commission, which had already been formed by this point in time, had 18 months to present proposals for changes to city code to implement the oversight system called for in our voter-approved ballot measure. Then City Council was to propose amendments to our code and to the accountability section. That was Section 8 of the settlement agreement. And that those would be within 60 days of the presentation from the Police Accountability Commission, so we had a timeline on that. And then 21 days after DOJ approved the code and after the court and DOJ approved the amendments to the settlement agreement, we had to bring those code changes to council, which occurred in October of last year. Well, it occurred, in September of last year, but there was a 30-day period. So those took effect in October of last year. And then within 12 months of that date, the oversight system was to be staffed and operational, and IPR was going to stop taking new work and then complete any pending work that they had. And there's also a provision for good faith basis for an extension of timelines on that. Then in 2023, there were discussions happening in 21-22 about maybe transitioning to an independent monitor. There were challenges between the city and DOJ as far as feeling like goalposts were moving. And there was an interest in maybe bifurcating DOJ's role. So as I said, DOJ had a dual role of being both a plaintiff and thus an enforcer of the settlement agreement. And secondly, a role as a monitor of the settlement agreement terms. And we decided to bifurcate the roles so that they're now only the plaintiff and have enforcement authority. And we agreed to hire an independent monitor to perform the monitoring work. And they also, not only did they replace DOJ as a monitor, but also the compliance officer and community liaison. We then took the paragraphs and grouped them into what we call discrete sections. I don't know why we came up with that name, but that was the name we came up with. So paragraphs are now grouped together. There's a table that I had printed out for you, but it is in the PowerPoint presentation. It's just a little bit small print to see. So I'll go over that with you, but it has the discrete sections. We then agreed also to something called self-monitoring and partial termination. So whereas I said previously, we had to be in substantial compliance with all paragraphs in the settlement agreement for 1 year before we'd go into a monitoring period monitored by DOJ and retain that substantial compliance for another year before we would be eligible to move for dismissal. We agreed that we would come up with a new process wherein these discrete sections could be partially terminated as we made it to substantial compliance for, again, a 1-year period. And then also we came up with, instead of monitoring a monitoring year that was by some outside entity, we created a self-monitoring period where the city would start adopting those practices ourselves and look at ensuring that we were following the terms on our own and had implemented systems that were durable and capable. So now under that process, we don't have to be in substantial compliance with all paragraphs before we're eligible for termination. 2, the way it works now, as I said, it'll go from monitoring to self-monitoring, and then it's eligible for dismissal. And lastly, there was a recognition of successful completion of several paragraphs. Approximately 40% of the settlement agreement was terminated based on a recognition of successful completion and substantial compliance with those paragraphs and discrete sections for, at that point, it was a 3-year period of time that we were looking at to determine which paragraphs would get dismissed. And then subsequent to that, last year, we did make those amendments to the accountability section to update it. So instead of referencing independent police review as part of the settlement agreement accountability process, now we've added in the oversight system and accounted for their role in the accountability. Okay. And moving on to the next slide, so you have the discrete section table. Basically, the table is set with 4 columns, and the first column shows the discrete sections, so you know what paragraphs are grouped together to be a discrete section. There can be as few as 1 paragraph in a discrete section or as many as 7. The second column shows you what was our status as of the point in time that the monitor's appointment occurred, because we agreed that if DOJ had found us in substantial compliance in their last review, or if the COCOL's last 2 reports had found us in substantial compliance, that then with one monitor review, then that would be substantial compliance. So we were looking at where do we start out? The third column showed the status of each discrete section at the end of the monitor's first report. So the monitor reported on July 1 of 2024 when they started their work through December 31st of 2024. We got that report in, that was publicly released and filed in June, toward the end of June of this year. We're now in the second monitoring review report, which covers the first half of 2025. And that's been released for public comment, but it could change. So until it's finalized, we won't know. But we did put the status as of that draft report, just so you have a sense of what's going on. You'll see things that are green, that's substantial compliance. Yellow means partial compliance, meaning we're not out of compliance, we're still working to get into substantial compliance, however. All right, and moving on to the next slide, I'm just gonna kind of go through these slides, but this just gives you a sense. And what I wanted to share with you is you can sort of see that the grayed out areas are all areas that have been terminated on these slides. And you can see several paragraphs that have been in green that have moved from monitoring to self-monitoring. Some of them moved directly into self-monitoring because upon the monitor's first report, we agreed that with some back with a report by DOJ or 2 COCOL reports that would automatically put it into self-monitoring. So now we're potentially in our second self-monitoring report, and for those that are green, then we might be eligible for termination. So you can see on this first page where down below at the bottom 2 greens, it says SM and then term eligible. In other words, it is eligible for termination, assuming the draft report on those sections doesn't change. So we can keep going through. What you see on the next 3 slides is just more of the same, but it does show you at the end there are 7 paragraphs with which the city is currently only in partial compliance and 6 discrete sections. The rest, assuming nothing changes, are in substantial compliance.
Heidi, before you go on, I think there's a question on the table itself. So,
Oh,
Councilor
yeah,
Smith.
please.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm going back to one of the green sections on the table that identifies behavioral health as something that's going to be removed. And I think you saw last week there was a grand jury for Damon Lamar Johnson, and his cause of death was prone restraint cardiac arrest. And he was experiencing a mental health breakdown. So I'm trying to figure out if that's going to be terminated. Was this particular case included in the observation of termination for that particular table piece? Because it seems to me that that is another example of where it was known that he was having a mental health breakdown, and we did not have any services in addition to law enforcement who were there that could have talked him away from the window and into services. I reviewed the video several times, and there were several opportunities for us to have him engage with other folks other than law enforcement. And I think that that is where we were left with someone who was whose heart was not beating when he was put into the ambulance, and that was as a direct contact with law enforcement.
Counselor, I believe that that Mr. Johnson's death occurred after the end of June, and so that would not be in this reporting period, as I recall.
Okay.
If it wasn't even so, it needs to go through the review process. So I know it is still there's an extensive deadly force review process that occurs, and that is still ongoing now. So there's Internal Affairs does, an extensive review. Detectives have completed their review for purposes of criminal charges against the officers involved. But
There were no criminal charges.
So, right. So although there's no criminal charges, that's a different standard than our policy and whether our policy were followed appropriately. So the question of whether our policies were followed will be assessed by Internal Affairs, or is in the process of being assessed by Internal Affairs. And also there's a review by the training facility to determine whether they followed training. So that process, Counselor, is ongoing now.
Okay. I just
so
didn't
we won't know.
Okay. I didn't know where we were, if that would have some sort of impact on what we're doing in this process.
It will not, but I also want to note one other piece, which is this. The crisis index is different than the community-based mental health organizations. So the community-based mental health organizations, which are paragraphs 88 through 90, and which are the ones that you're talking about, are potentially eligible for termination. I would note that technically under the manner in which we were analyzing, we had been in substantial compliance in that section for years. And the reason is because everybody other than the Mental Health Alliance agreed, and Judge Simon agreed, that section did not put an obligation on the city, but instead was the city encouraging our community care organizations within the Portland community to support our community members experiencing either a mental health crisis or having a mental illness. And so, so that section going away doesn't change that the city hopefully will continue to work closely with our community care organizations and the county to best serve our community members. So that those particular paragraphs should not impact the city and the city's ability. The crisis intervention might be more the section that you'd be looking at, and then the accountability section of whether or not the way the officers responded and addressed it will be analyzed through that internal affairs process that I told you about. Last thing I will say,
He's in compliance, whether or not our officers were in compliance or not compliance.
with our with the PPB
policies.
policies, yes.
Right.
And then when the new oversight system is up and taking cases, they will, all deadly force cases and all use of force cases will go to that oversight system. And so they'll do the analysis that is currently going on by internal affairs. They will receive feedback from training, but they will be the ones doing that investigation and then determination of whether the conduct was in or out of policy.
So internal affairs will not be doing, after this new policy, internal affairs will not be doing any investigations at all?
They will be doing investigations, Counselor. There's a number of types of misconduct that are outside the purview of the oversight system as it stands right now. However, given the charter language says that as the oversight board deems fit, they can take different types of misconduct cases. We just put in code that they would just come to council to add in whatever other kind of misconduct allegation they want to add.
Okay.
So that we know where cases are going.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you, Heidi. If you feel free to finish off your slides, and then there'll probably be more questions.
Just a couple more slides. I just do want to, on the next slide, please. I do want to get you up to date, though, on a couple of recent events related to the Department of Justice. First of all, on October 3rd of 2025, DOJ sent to the city an extensive document request, and they alleged that the city, a concern that the city was engaged, and PPB were engaging in viewpoint discrimination. Nothing about excessive force. I do want to note to the three of you that this is, four of you, sorry, Councilor Murillo. that there's nothing about excessive force, which is what this case was about, was related to pattern and practice, an allegation of a pattern and practice of excessive force against persons who are either in a mental health crisis or having a mental illness. They requested information related to three things: the arrest of Nick Sorter, the non-arrest of anybody related to the Katie Davis court incident at a similar protest or the same protest. And then they're also asking for information about the city's zoning enforcement related to the ICE facility. On October 6th, the city attorney's office sent a response to the DOJ asking first if DOJ cares about the Constitution, asking about the excessive and unjustified uses of force by the federal government against peaceful protesters in Portland, raising a concern about whether the federal government was engaging in viewpoint discrimination by targeting demonstrators based on their speech that the federal government disliked and favoring speech they liked. In the city's response, we said that we do not recognize the United States authority to access these records under the settlement agreement between the United States and the city. And we therefore are treating that request as a document records request under Oregon public records laws. Since then, we then received a second and more extensive document request on October 29th, to which we responded similarly, and we summarized our response as follows. The city does not accept this attempt by the federal government to manipulate and exploit the agreement and finds these actions unconscionable, and we will not give you access to our documents for this purpose. We are once again treating it as a public records request. The Department of Justice has expressed its concern with that approach, arguing that they get full access to all of our records for they're alleging any reason. And I would note that the city and the AMAC and the MHA are standing in solidarity against this enforcement action. The very last thing I wanted to make you aware of is this. There have been 2 complaints filed recently with the Department of Justice alleging similarly practice at the city and with PPB of viewpoint discrimination. The first complaint was filed by the American First League, a organization founded by Stephen Miller, and it's a 3 or 4 page complaint. The second complaint was filed by the attorney for Mr. Sorter, whose law firm also represents and has represented Joey Gibson. They filed a 22-page complaint alleging conduct going back to 2017 and stating that there was a practice and pattern of viewpoint discrimination against conservative and right-wing viewpoints. So those are, I did want you to be aware of what we're currently dealing with right now. Our next hearing on the DOJ settlement agreement is on January 6th, and I'm happy to provide further information after that and answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Heidi. So I think what I'm going to do here is first start by opening this up for questions. I do want to note for full transparency that this presentation referenced a part of my work at the Police Accountability Commission on slide 9, just for transparency here. But I would like to open this up for questions and answers on any part of this or anything related to the settlement agreement. And I'll just mention that, Heidi, please feel free to phone a friend. I know there's a lot of people in this room who you may want to ask if there's any part they want to speak to. But colleagues, if you would just like to raise your hand in Zoom if you have a question, we'll start with that and then we'll move on to discussion afterwards. Councilor Smith, is that a legacy hand?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Zimmerman.
Heidi, thanks. So I have a tough time with these reports because I feel like I just listened to how to do a process and I don't really know what is changing in practice. That's one of my frustrations, frankly, with how long this has gone. Given the cases that were cited for the reason we got into this, I'm not fully understanding why the things that were listed in 2020 became almost like reset points, it seemed like, in the way they were presented, because I didn't see any mentally ill use of force cases like we've stopped being in alignment with what the work had, where the work had started with. So how do I, as a person elected to represent the community some 20 years after Mr. Chassie, understand what is changing versus what appears to be a process upon a process that has gone through the DOJ flavor of the week for 4 administrations, and they all have put their own stamp on it while we have maintained and stayed here. And now we have an apparatus around this thing, but I have yet to hear one explanation for like what's different. So I guess I'm looking for when are we going to wrap this thing up? Because I don't believe in projects that are lifelong projects that need this kind of attention. So when are we going to wrap it up, and what can we talk about that is different today than it was in 2004?
Okay, can I start with the second question first, or do you want me to do the first?
Wherever you want.
Okay, thank you. So what has changed? The Police Bureau is in a good position to answer those questions more fully, but I can tell you some things about it, which is one. When we went into the settlement agreement, we didn't have a specific crisis intervention training, and we certainly didn't have an enhanced crisis intervention training. And so that is one significant change. Now, whether it always works, I can't answer that question, but does it help equip our officers with other tools to respond to somebody in a mental health crisis and who's experiencing a mental illness? Yeah, I think it certainly does. And so that, I think, is really a good thing that has come out of this. I would also note that, as you saw, it was the use of tasers that were the most concerning thing to DOJ at the time that they made findings on a pattern of practice. And the use of tasers, particularly on people in a mental health crisis who are mentally ill, has significantly decreased. And so we have seen significant changes in some of the areas that were of most concern to the Department of Justice. When will this lead to? I think, our position in our office has been advocating for the court to return control over the Police Bureau to the City Council and to the mayor, and to the Police Bureau, to the police chief, that is, with the understanding that we have a council and a mayor who bring a lot of concern for excessive use of force. We have a bureau that's taken a lot of steps to incorporate policy changes, et cetera, and to review force cases with a different eye than was reviewed in the past, as of, 14 years ago when they first, in 2011, were first invited here. So there have been, I think, significant changes. And that's been our position, is to return the control over to you all and to the mayor. And I think, as you can see too, with all the grayed out areas in this, that we have been able to reach substantial compliance on numerous sections of the settlement agreement. And so I do think that's significant for you to see what's changed. Well, clearly enough has changed that we've been able to terminate numerous paragraphs. And so I think with that, when I was sharing, we've got 7 paragraphs, 6 discrete sections left that are not yet in substantial compliance. We're gonna have to get into substantial compliance, remain in on those 7 paragraphs, 6 sections for 1 year, then have 1 year of self-monitoring. So we're looking at least 2 years out, Counselor, before we would be eligible, unless...
Why does the 2020 actions, how is it related to the mental health interactions that were the igniting issue? Am I unaware of like something related to the demonstration issues that were happening and the use of force? Was it against mentally ill people? Is that why it's in the report, or is it just a new thing that we've added on? Is this a DOJ settlement that just continues to get new layers, or is it related to the beginning topic?
There were not there were not a lot of allegations of use of excessive force resulting from the protests specific to people in a mental health crisis or who were mentally ill. I think that given the experience of 2020 and trying to find a way to heal the city, that council agreed that it was appropriate to amend the settlement agreement and add these additional requirements.
So this was the city council, not Judge Simon or not the DOJ at the federal level. It was the city council who added those?
Well, DOJ filed a notice with us that they believed we were in breach of the settlement agreement. There were certain terms, for example, force reporting during that 6-month period of time was not timely. Officers were doing long shifts,
Sure.
and sometimes we're not getting the reports filled out timely. It is a requirement under the settlement agreement. Secondly,
I get that, yeah.
yeah, and the after-action review process, similarly, that got delayed sometimes by a couple months, particularly at the beginning, until some other processes were stood up. Training got impacted because of COVID, and all the overtime budget was getting used up due to the protests, hence the separate line item. So there were things that happened, Counselor, that were violations of the settlement agreement, and that would have given a argument for Judge Simon to decide maybe some other equitable remedies. I think the city felt like the best approach to it was to find a way, like I said, to heal from that experience and find a reasonable way to move forward.
Okay. One of the things that has been conveyed to me at different times is that we end up spending a lot of time every time there's a new presidential administration, a new focus at DOJ, or simply they put a new guy on the team, and that we have to now interpret their personal baggage that they bring to the work in a way that becomes like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that's been this on and off. And I'm trying to understand the implications of that. And, you know, having gone now through, we're in the 4th administration, if you will, I'm wondering, like, what does this look like if, you know, in the next administration, like if we're a couple more years away, and then, or if they decide to assign a new federal, I don't even know what the right term is, but employee to this, would we be in a case of we're now moving goalposts, or we're reinterpreting what means what? I have written down here is like, who actually decides what substantial compliance is? You mentioned a few things, but I want to know who decides that and how do we do that? And I think it's relative to the DOJ personnel who are involved, because we're all still here. They're the rotating factors, best I can tell.
Well, Counselor, we did, one of the benefits to our amendments in 2023 were to bifurcate that role of DOJ. So now they're the plaintiff only, and they enforce the settlement agreement. So they have enforcement authority, but they don't have monitoring authority. They get to oversee the monitor, and if they feel that the monitor's not doing a sufficient job, and therefore
They hire him though?
It was a joint effort between the city and DOJ. City hired him. The city's responsible for paying for their services. There's a team, but and then there have been some different interpretations of the settlement agreement by the monitor that have been a little challenging at times for us, because we have over 10 years of getting used to one interpretation. So we're trying to get on the same page with the monitor and figure out where when they see something differently, ideally finding about it early enough so that we can address and make changes and get into substantial compliance. But it's been a process of adjusting to the monitor. But it is good that, in answer to your question, DOJ is no longer in that role of monitor. So to the extent there's changes in administration, that will not impact the monitoring. What it could impact is if we want to move for partial termination, we can still make that motion if DOJ doesn't agree, and Judge Simon can still consider that. But it's a little nicer if we're all on the same page with that. And then lastly is that we're dealing with some potential enforcement actions with their allegation that we're not providing them documents that they think they have access to under the settlement agreement, and we think is not relevant to the settlement agreement, and therefore is not a reasonable request, which is what's
Hence
required.
part of why I'd like to get this thing put to bed, because it seems like they were now using excuses from other areas of an administration's bone to pick. But we have this opening that they can use to exploit that is very troubling to me. Thank you. This is, I think, it's an important part of our community. It's also really hard to track when we're talking about processes instead of like, I understand like the difference between crisis intervention and not, and those times that we've all lived here and what we've seen be incorporated. That's easier to track than some of this other. And then I have somewhat, I think, a question for both the chair. And I understand that there was some sort of hearing earlier in the year that you, Councilor Canal, testified at. I have heard only in the rumor mill that occurred, but I'd like to understand our role here. What was the testimony? What was the hearing? Are we as a committee sending you to testify on our behalf? Because that's not something I think I've been tracking and so I'd like to be on the same page. Are we sending you out with a city council's emissary message, or was this you swimming in a lane that you used to be in as an employee and now we're over here? I need to understand what occurred, because all I've heard is that something occurred, and I can't tell yet if it was appropriate, inappropriate, or what the point was. So I'd like to understand that, since we're here now to understand the DOJ settlement and our role here.
Would you like to go first, Heidi, on that, or do you want me?
Well, I could just say that under the old form of government, the mayor would come, and then sometimes opened the door for other commissioners to attend. And so we would have a rotation. Commissioner Hardesty came a couple different times, and then other commissioners also were interested in attending. Commissioner Rubio attended once, et cetera. So there was that process. Since the change of form of government, then that changes how that all looks. I will defer to Councilor Canal on coming to the hearing, but I would note that he did not testify as part of the city and on behalf of the city.
Okay.
So that I see that as a different position to present, and I thought he made that pretty clear that he was not testifying on behalf of the city council.
Okay.
And I'll also note, that I wasn't testifying on behalf of the committee either. I think, in fact, if I recall correctly, the January one occurred before we even had committees. We've had
The topic, if I could. What was the point of the hearing?
find it. So there's status conferences and there's fairness hearings. I will also say that part of the issue to compare, that makes it difficult to compare, is that there are fewer hearings now than there used to be. I think that's a fair assessment, but if you
They
can
used
speak.
to only be once a year, actually, and that was one of the appeal issues that occurred that Dr. Haynes referenced. And then as we were switching over to this new process of a monitor, et cetera, we changed it, so it's going to be it's twice a year now.
Okay.
And there was a period of time where we were going a little more regularly because we had amendments and things going on.
So this was in your personal capacity, it sounds like.
Yeah, I signed up just as I did in the previous committee.
Okay.
I signed up for the through the normal process everyone else does.
Okay. Thanks. But I'm going to ask one last question, but I just want to appreciate Dr. Haynes, the introduction to this topic. I very much valued the run through of that, so thank you, sir. And Heidi, my last question is, for things like the behavioral health unit, community-based mental health services, as a longtime veteran of Multnomah County, knowing where these things actually live and are part of the county's workload, and yet we don't do any of this, why is it in a DOJ settlement for a thing we don't control?
So the behavioral health unit is a unit within PPB, and it's.
I guess I'm meaning mostly the community-based mental health services.
Yeah.
We don't fund that
Right.
at all, have no authority over it. The mental health authority is the county.
Right.
I understood the behavioral health unit as a PPB unit.
Okay.
Why are we being accounted for the CBMHS?
Well, that is one section that started directly in self-monitoring. It was a section that the Mental Health Alliance was interested in retaining in during the monitors period. We've been found in substantial compliance on that for many, many years now, and now are eligible potentially for termination because we don't have any authority over our community organizations. So it's really just us encouraging them to partner with us and collaborate with us, but we really don't have the authority to order them to provide services or more services or better services or anything like that, to the extent that those organizations are not meeting their needs. So I think it's just all of us trying to work together, but it was not ever something, Judge Simon agreed early on in the case that wasn't an obligation that the city could meet.
Okay, so I thought that was my last question, but I have one more, Council Chair. So since I happen to know something about Multnomah County, I was able to zero in on that one. But if I was an expert on all of these, would I zero in on multiple things that are actually not the city's purview that fall into this similar category, or is that a one-off?
That's a one-off.
Okay.
Those are paragraphs 88 through 90. That is that discrete section that will likely be up for termination. So other than that, the obligations are mostly on PPB and then some on BOEC.
Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll ask just one question, and then we do have some folks signed up to testify. So I want to make sure we have time for them. Heidi, you walked through the change from the Department of Justice as a monitor to the independent monitoring team. And we hired a court-appointed independent monitor as part of that process, who started with the second half of 2024. The contract for the COCL, the COCL, went through the end of June, if I recall correctly, and because of the lag in reporting, we had a final report from the COCL about January through March, and then the new monitoring team started on July 1st, and their first report was about July 1st through December 31st. So it's a two-part question. Can you speak to how who monitored April through June 2024?
The city and DOJ agreed that there might be a point of time that was not going to be monitored and reported on. So I wouldn't say it was not monitored, because the COCL remained involved up through the end of their contract at the end of June of 2024. So it's not as if they weren't going to training and coming in and participating in police review board meetings related to force, similar to DOJ also was doing that through the end of that period of time. So there was oversight involved, but we just agreed that there had to be a cutoff point. And rather than continue COCL's contract and extend it and pay them more money, we agreed with DOJ at the time that we amended it to allow for the monitor, that there could be a point in time where there wouldn't be a formal report. But my understanding is that the COCL gave the information and worked closely. We had a 30-day overlap between the COCL and the independent monitor. And during that period of time, the plan was that the COCL would meet as needed by the independent monitor to share information, generally about how they did their work, but also about that prior period of time when the transition was happening.
So I don't mean to compare 2024 to 2020, but the Portland State University protests did occur in that window of time, and PPB was involved in the response to that. I've not seen any written documentation through the settlement agreement process that documents that in any way. I know it's been discussed at PSEP and a couple other venues by members of the public coming to testify, as well as I imagine some of the volunteers. But can you speak to either now, or feel free to tell me, you'll follow up later, about how that process covered those protests and the Portland Police's response to that?
So two thoughts about this. One is that to the extent there were complaints of use of excessive force in violation of PPB policy, those complaints would have been made in May, correct? And so then they would go through that process of review, and I have not seen one get through that quickly of an internal affairs investigation process, such that it wouldn't be police review board happening between July 1 and December 31st, or potentially later, depending on if the officers weren't available, et cetera. So first of all, it is likely
Clarify, because I think this relates to Councilor Smith's question earlier. We would see it where the internal administrative accountability process, when that completes, the period of time in which it completes, the reporting on that would cover it. In other words,
monitor.
Right.
Yes.
So if there was a complaint about an event that occurred in April 2024, and the administrative investigation concluded in, let's say, April 2025, we would see that in the report for April 2025,
Correct.
which is January through June.
Correct.
And I think that relates to Damon Lamar Johnson as well, although I will note that was June 27th, by the way.
It's still, yes, but that's only just started just before. So even though it started just before this reporting period, it still will be in there. It is subsequently, so it's, and get reviewed.
All right, well, thank you. We might call you back up if there's anything later, but thank you. Yeah.
The only other thing I wanted to say, sorry, I said I had 2 points, which is that, there was an independent critical assessment of 2020 that was quite extensive, about 78 pages. There is an opportunity if council wants to, we had to pay for that one, and we would have to pay for somebody else if you wanted to look at the 2024 protest event at PSU. That's something council could determine.
Thank you.
So I think that's in your hands too. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. So we're going to move on to taking public testimony. Diana, could you please read the next item?
Item number 2, United States versus City of Portland Settlement Agreement Updates, Public Comment.
And
I have 2 people signed up for this.
Okay. I thought we had 3.
I apologize, I have 3 people signed up. I did my math wrong.
No problem. Can you call everyone up together?
Correct. Let's see, we've got Brian Owendoff, Jason Renaud, and Edith Gillis.
Thank you all for being here, and please feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Great. Brian Owendoff, District 4 resident and business owner. I'm here today to speak about the labor dispute between AFSCME Local 189's independent police review employees in the city of Portland, specifically the deeply concerning lack of transparency and accountability to the city's approach to this contract. IPR employees are among the most experienced police oversight professionals in Oregon. They investigate police misconduct, respond to community concerns, and uphold the integrity of our accountability systems. And yet, as Portland transitions to a new Office of Community-Based Police Accountability, these workers, the very people that make oversight possible, have been left in limbo. For months, AFSCME has asked for one fundamental assurance, that the people who have dedicated their careers to police accountability will not be disregarded in the transition. They've asked for clear, binding language that protects the jobs or provides a fair pathway into new oversight structure. What they have received instead is delay, opacity, and shifting explanations. The city claims that the charter prevents job protections, yet the union has repeatedly asked for clarifications, legal analysis, or alternate solutions, and have been met with vague answers or no answers at all. That is not transparency. That is not good faith bargaining. Meanwhile, IPR employees are being asked to reapply for their jobs with no guarantees of placement. That is not good faith bargaining. These are public servants who have spent years defending the public's right to know the truth. And yet, when they are asked for basic honesty and a clear path forward, they're told to simply trust the very system that they're helping to reform. This is more than a labor dispute. It is a test of Portland's values. You cannot build a stronger community-centered accountability system by destabilizing the people who have upheld accountability for decades. You cannot claim to support transparency while refusing to provide it to your own workers. Today, I'm asking this committee to intervene publicly and unequivocally, support a contract that provides meaningful job protections, preserves institutional expertise, and ensures transparency throughout the transition, and hold the city's bargaining team accountable to the values Portland claims to uphold. It should not have taken 6 months post-contract expiration and a strike for labor negotiations to be fairly honored. When we talk about building public trust in government and in police oversight, it starts here, with whether we treat our own accountability workers fairly, honesty, and with respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason Renaud. I'm with the Mental Health Alliance today, and I think this is going to be about 4 minutes. If you have some grace. The Mental Health Association of Portland focused on the lethal use of force by the Portland Police Bureau against people with mental illness in 2006 with the brutal killing of James Chassie. And I'll note that regardless of dozens of public marches and demonstrations, hundreds of local and national news articles, a deeply flawed self-investigation by the Portland Police Bureau, by the Portland Police Chief at the time, and the largest settlement against the Police Bureau of its time, and the findings of the DOJ that the Portland Police Bureau has a pattern and practice of harming people with mental illness. This council and prior mayors have not brought any accountability to the officers who killed James Chassie. Because the findings of the US DOJ investigation, those findings are completely relevant today. Although Damon Lamar Johnson, a man with schizophrenia, exactly like James Chassie, was killed by Portland police officers in June, the Multnomah County District Attorney seems to have no ability to hold the officers accountable. The Oregon Department of Justice will not take action. The Oregon Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, which both certifies and decertifies officers, will take no action. There are no plans to investigate what happened to Damon Lamar Johnson by Multnomah County, even though he was a person with schizophrenia and supposedly in public care. And the Police Review Board might know something eventually, but we'll never know what that is. The Independent Police Review, for some reason, does not review in custody killings, and the Future Accountability Board is in the future, and its capacity is untested. So the only venue for accountability is the civil court. There was no weapon, there was no crime, there was no threat of violence, there was just an innocent man with a medical crisis, the sort of crisis Project Respond has managed every day and every night for the past 30 years without killing anyone. And so the settlement agreement has not finished its work. I understand the lawyers on both sides are peeved. There's an ongoing and amateurish attempt to weaponize the agreement to serve the political fantasies of the White House. But the work of the agreement to reduce lethal force against people with mental illness by police, if that's the work of the agreement, and maybe it's not, that is unfinished. In 2012, the Mental Health Association of Portland joined with Disability Rights Oregon and the Oregon Justice Resource Center, along with dozens of unaffiliated advocates and activists, to create the Mental Health Alliance to inform the court about the impact of lethal force against people with mental illness. That has meant literally thousands of meetings, public and private, court hearings, mediations, briefings, tens of thousands of hours spent by skilled and knowledgeable volunteers, often assisted by our allies at the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, and other experts, both local and national. As friends of the court, there's really been no difference between enhanced amicus and amicus. To find a path to justice, to impress on the PPB that mercy and compassion are fundamental tools of policing. It hasn't really worked. Mercy and compassion have not become values of our police bureau, and Damon Johnson is all the evidence that we understand that the courts in the world, all the courts in the world won't make that change needed. The solution has always been two parts. One, to reduce lethal force, cities, counties, and states need to hold officers accountable. That's underway, not happening yet. Second, to reduce use of force, cities, counties, and states need to provide an adequate alternative response, a non-police response. For people with mental illness and crisis who have not committed a crime and pose no threat. James Chassie was that person in 2006. Damon Johnson was that person in 2025. Skip to the last paragraph. The Mental Health Alliance will stand with the city on motion, against the motion to enforce the DOJ's weaponization of the settlement agreement. We might also oppose a motion to vacate this agreement by the city. We suggest you build your accountability board, you build your alternative response team, you stop 911 from sending police to medical emergencies, and let the court monitor do its work. We're on the downhill slope. We're on our way to the end of this. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Edith.
Hello, my name is Edith Gillis, and I'm speaking to you as someone who has suffered a lot of violence, stopping my heart and lungs several times by Portland police. Never was I in a mental health crisis, never was I homeless, never was I Black, never was I violent or threatening to break any laws. I'm also a member of the Pacific Northwest Family Circle, and Sunday, we had a gathering at a park that's being developed honoring some of the hundreds of people who were killed in Oregon by law enforcement. I have also been a foster parent, and I've been volunteering out on the streets helping folks that are unhoused due to public policy that is inhumane and uneconomical. I am hearing from folks that there are hundreds, not exaggerating, hundreds of people who have been killed by Portland Police Bureau in the last 20, 25 years. Most of those are people who are sex workers, who are trafficked, rape victims, or are unhoused, or are immigrants, or combination. And their lives are not valued, their lives are not their deaths are not reported. And if anything happens, they're called suspects, as if they are the criminals. I have been a street medic at different protests for 43 years in Portland, de-escalating, protecting people, providing first aid from crimes committed by police and by the white terrorists, fascists that the police protect and assist. There is very different enforcement according to their perception of a category of people who are marginalized and by political beliefs. I am often providing comfort to folks who are victims of police brutality, who dare not speak up because their children or their elderly or their handicapped partner will be killed or worse by the police. It's a much bigger problem than you seem to be aware of. I could list a whole lot of names, but I would go over the time. If the intention of the DOJ settlement is to have you stop having police have complete immunity to terrorize folks and wasting our tax dollars and preventing us from having our money spent on what does prevent crime and does protect public and does uphold public safety, then you need to pursue more than just, is this in the gray zone or is this supposedly settled? Because I don't see anything that's near adequate.
Thank you to all three of our testifiers. Just to close this item up on the settlement agreement, I'm very aware that we're hearing about some heavy topics today related to patterns and practices, and I'm sure that we'll be talking about this again. I think this is the introduction to the item, and as the settlement agreement continues and as as policing continues to evolve in the city of Portland, I'm sure that this committee will be a place where we talk about these items on a regular basis. Thank you, and with that, we'll move into the next item. Diana, will you please read it?
Item 3, appoint and reappoint members of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing.
Thank you. Colleagues, today we'll be considering whether to refer to the full council a report which will confirm the mayoral appointments of 6 people to the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing and reappoint 2 current members. This presentation will be led by Dory Grabinski, Program Manager for PSEP. I also want to just preemptively welcome all the nominees, many of whom are here today in person or online. Take it away.
Good afternoon, Chair Canal and members of the committee. My name is Dory Grabinski, and I'm the Program Manager for the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, also known as PSEP. So I want to start by thanking Dr. Haynes and Heidi for a perfect presentation to tee us up today, as PSEP was originally established by the settlement agreement. And I also want to thank each of the counselors for taking time to meet with us this fall individually and talk about this program and what we hope to reflect in our membership. So with that said, we are here today to request the appointments of 6 new PSEP members, as well as the reappointments of 2 ongoing members. So I'll begin with a quick refresher on what PSEP is and does. I'll try to go fast here. So Dr. Haynes explained the precipitating incidents of the settlement agreement, and that is also where the story begins for PSEP. Because of the history of community organizing that resulted in the settlement, PSEP was created as one of the remedies under that agreement to institutionalize that voice and make sure the community is always part of shaping our city's public safety systems. And PSEP stands in a long continuum of community work towards equitable and constitutional policing, reflecting a powerful commitment by the city to uphold the changes it pledged to make. And next slide. So we also like to emphasize that this program serves a unique function in our city landscape. PSEP is the only platform devoted to engagement between community, PPB, and city leadership that is administratively independent from the PPB. This program works in two major lanes: policy recommendations and community engagement. And of course, those lanes overlap and inform one another. This is very distinct from the CBPA, the Community Board for Police Accountability, which focuses more narrowly on administrative discipline and misconduct complaints. And next slide. So, as I said moments ago, PSEP's work falls under two umbrellas: formal policy recommendations to the chief and the mayor, and facilitating engagement between the public, PPB, and city leadership to share information and build trust. You can see some examples of these types of work on this slide. And as a follow-on to the conversation with Heidi, part of PSEP's work over the years has included helping parse settlement agreement developments to the public and assessing how those remedies have been progressing within PPB. And next slide. So getting into the nuts and bolts, PSEP is a committee of 13 members who serve 2-year appointments. We have reserved seats for youth and give special consideration to those with lived experience of mental illness or addiction. And next slide. These are the very basics of how recruitment works for the committee. And as you know, these are mayoral selections that must be confirmed by council. And you'll note that we did review 60 applications this cycle. Next slide. All right, on to the fun part. So we have with us today our candidates up for committee approval. They are a talented slate of community members with diverse backgrounds, skills, and perspectives, and I'm excited for you to hear from them directly. And then let's just jump ahead 2 slides really quick. Also for your reference, these, one more. One more, yeah. Oh, sorry, the slide with the reappointments. Sorry about that. So yeah, and for your reference, these are the members who are up for reappointment as well, who are continuing or hoping to continue their service. So at this time, I will invite our first group of appointees to join me on the dais. And we are also going to begin with a video recording from our one appointee who was unable to attend in person or virtually due to work conflicts. So we will go ahead and play her video.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Perry. Hello, my name is Vanessa Perry. I use she, her, aya pronouns. My apologies for not being able to join you synchronously. I am in the physician assistant program at OHSU, which is what brought me to Portland. My background is that of a licensed therapist, and I also taught in a graduate program in clinical mental health at the University of Arizona for the last 9 years. So my background is firmly embedded in mental health. But I come from a really strong DEI lens, being from a Latina, and also just understanding different systems of inequity and how they impact folks when they meet with mental health. So that's why this committee is really important to me, because I think that it's a way to improve the quality of life and the experience of being a community member in Portland for people with mental health diagnoses. And community engaged policing is really an important way, is a vital way for us to make sure that we can ensure the safety of these folks that are often vulnerable and marginalized. Thank you so much for your consideration.
All right, and our remaining 5 candidates are here with us in person today, and we will just go down the line. So go ahead, Andrew.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I am a Portland resident, District 2. Professionally, I have a background in data analytics and cloud computing. Personally, I'm also a member of the board of directors for a national nonprofit called Trouble & Co., in which we provide training skills and tools to those at most risk by the system. We consider it for both political and environmental risk to drive community engagement using data and technology. Personally, I have been both as a position of somebody who's been unhomed for multiple years and faced intervention by professional staff of the cities that I live in for mental health. So my goal here is to provide a view on data analytics in the voice of lived experience as best I can, and that's why I'm here. Yeah.
And can you say your name for the record just before you?
Yeah, Andrew Hopp. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Davidson. I was born in Portland. I live in Portland. I went to David Douglas School District. My students go to Centennial. I'm a school bus driver. I work in the schools. I see lots of down-low struggles. You know, I see it at the street level. And I have a child that has or is autistic, and I have a non-binary child, and I just have a lot of concerns for the future for them with the current history that I see, especially after being here today and really getting to see some of that nitty-gritty details. You know, knowing there's a pattern and seeing the specific examples really can change things for you. I just am here because I feel like I need to do something. Things need to change. Things need to, you know, move in a better direction. And instead of sitting at my house and yelling at the TV about how these things need to change, I'm here to actually be a part of it and try and make that happen.
Hello, my name is Faraya Vasquez Potter. I am the Reimagining Justice and Cully Project Coordinator with the Native American Youth and Family Center. I have a background in criminal justice and tech project management. I also have a child on the autism spectrum and several family members with mental health and addiction issues who have also experienced homelessness. I feel responsible to use my voice to advocate for people that can't for themselves. And hope to do that for everybody in the BIPOC community, as well as marginalized communities as well. Thanks.
And if our remaining two appointees would join me at the dais, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman, Councilman Zimmerman, Councilor Smith, and Councilor Canal. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. My name is Pastor Robin Weisner. 30 years in the city of Portland resident. Been civic involved for 30 years in the city of Portland. Pretty much I can say that out of the 30 years that I've been involved here, the intent was so that my son, when he was born, will have a place as a young African-American man to feel safe and live in a city that we moved to, where he was birthed at, and have the equal rights, be free to live, have fun, and grow up, play basketball, and also have an area where that he could trust a community that would receive him the way he is. My 30 years involvement, I got involved many years ago working through many different engagements, but I was previously appointed on PSEP. Previously was also appointed to the Independent Review, which as a volunteer had the balance where I would be equal and where I felt that all of the years that I worked, where I might have better focus of working accountability. And so now I'm back. The reason, again, is based upon the words that you've heard from my mentor and friend, Dr. Leroy Haynes. I do not want to forget the great work of Bishop A.A. Wells, Bishop or Pastor Hardy, as well as Dr. T. Allen Bethel, as well as Pastor Roy Tate. And there's many other shoulders that I stand on. And the work that we have really came to this place of what got us here. I feel that with the responsibility of those who have fought so hard and passed on, I should continue with great responsibilities to help continue the work that they do for accountability. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Fasika Bagela. I am a junior studying public and urban affairs at Portland State University on a pre-law track. Growing up in America, I've witnessed how trust has eroded over time when it comes to policing. And while I was a student at Occidental College in Los Angeles, I've firsthand had interactions with LAPD officers, and I've also studied the history of policing and what grassroots organizations are particularly doing to implement better policies. As a PSEP volunteer, I hope to help I hope to use what I've learned to provide suggestions that ensures oversight is transparent, accountable, and genuinely impactful. Most importantly, I want to bring forward perspectives that are often discussed but not always represented, which is those of young people, immigrant, and communities from people of color. Ultimately, in my involvement, I'm looking forward to working with those I can look up to and learn from with a shared goal of helping move Portland to a better and more broader, holistic vision of public safety, one that recognizes the role of housing, mental health, and community support alongside law enforcement.
I would like to add one thing for record. Also, for transparency, I am a steering committee of the Albina Miki as well.
That concludes our presentation. If you have any questions for our candidates, we can bring everybody back up, or questions for us.
Thank you. So in a moment, we'll start talking about the potential actions we could take, which include referral to the full council. But first, if any colleagues on the committee would like to ask any questions, we'll start with questions and we'll move into discussion. Councilor Zimmerman?
I'm just, first off, how many applicants did we have for these positions?
60 applications this round, this cycle.
That's a wonderful turnout. And then it looks like PSEP staff did some screening, and then, so if you could please give me an idea for what screening or vetting or what lens you all used for then who, it looks like you said the mayor selected these folks. Was that an interview with the mayor's team, or did he take your recommendation as the 6? I'm curious about this process.
Yeah, absolutely. So the mayor's office, the mayor's liaison, Christopher Taft, does participate in our final round interviews. And then he briefed the mayor on the results, and they made selections based on that.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Smith?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I appreciate you all taking this opportunity to use your discretionary time to work on an issue that is very important to our community. And I'll start with you, Pastor Wisner. What is the one thing that drew you to wanting to serve as a public servant on this particular issue?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Smith, and good friend of mine who understood from the very beginning the concerns that was happening and that was plaguing the community, which was the death that we was seeing by law enforcement. What got me there? Kendra James. And if you don't mind me stating up front that this part is still a little trauma to me, where that I'm emotional a little bit about it. But standing at her casket, talking to her father, and then at that time being a volunteer of the crisis response team, to have to deliver on the type of news that was given to the father, where that there was some challenges that she was dealing with in her life, but they expected death to come in one way. But when the finding of that, it was done by a Portland police officer, it was tragedy. And therefore, I felt at that point in time, as I promised, that I would be engaged just for her rights and justice to be served.
Thank you. I think we'll go to the left of you, and you talk just a little bit. I'm going to give you the same question. What singular thing? I think I remember you saying something about your children were a reason why you wanted to. Was there any single event that caused you to want to be on this particular committee at this particular time?
I'm going to try to keep it together. my son elopes from school. So what that means is he runs, he leaves, he gets off the property. And he is physical, and I just have this fear of when he elopes and they can't find him and they have to call the police and he's being violent because he has no other way, what's going to happen to him? But I also recognize my dad was a sheriff of Clackamas County, and my very best friend, her dad was a deputy in Clackamas County Prison or jail. And, I recognize that most of the people that are in that service are in that service for good reasons. But, you almost can't go a day without hearing things, and it's just terrifying. And I want to know that my children are going to be safe, and I want to know that my friend who's in a mental health crisis is going to make it out, and I want to know, that what we're trying to put in place is also fair to the people that we're putting in place to follow those rules for. I want to make sure that it's achievable goals, and I want to make sure that they're going to make a difference and they're going to actually keep people safe, because that's really what the goal should be, in my opinion.
Thank you. Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Fasika. And just answering your question, right?
Yes, just answer the same question.
What motivates me to apply for this role specifically was, growing up here in America, literally every time, every news is something associated with but when it comes to policing, wrongful death is happening, and just seeing how police respond in a way that it's not always, or that doesn't seem right. And then also when I was in high school, I took courses in public safety, and then in that course, we learned about how police are trained, and that what I've learned from that is what first made me think, oh, okay, it kind of makes sense where the system is going wrong, and it was because the way the police were being trained, it wasn't really in a way, from what I've thought at the time, at least, it wasn't. I feel like it could be better. And then while I was in school at Occidental College, I kind of have touched on it earlier as well. We would have in our class, LA police officers would come to our class and teach or talk about how they try to build trust within their communities, and then also there would be representatives from grassroots organization who would also come and have this conversation with us, which kind of further my interest when it comes to public safety. And I also just as a young person, I aspire to get into a law field later on down my path. And then I'm interested in this human rights law and just getting involved in something I care about, which is public safety in my own city, is what makes me want to apply for this role.
Thank you for wanting to serve. And I'll ask the same question down the line.
Hi, Faraya Vasquez Potter. I don't believe that anybody should have to be afraid for a biological or cognitive disability. I also grew up advocating for my mom, who was disabled, and saw her fight for herself and advocate for herself with police not being believed because of her disability. I also had a brother that was an addict and died homeless, who went through murder charges that were completely unfounded due to his addiction. And I don't want people to feel like they can't live their lives without fear. And obviously it's very important to me, and I think that, Portland is in such a really great position to be able to change things, and that's why I'm here. I want to be a part of that change.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that story about your family. Next.
Same question, I assume?
Yes, same question, and introduce yourself.
Andrew Hopp. I think I was looking for an opportunity to get involved, to be honest, out of an immense shame for what's happening in the country that I love. So I started looking for opportunities. I found this one as one that I fit in kind of an intersection of both advantage and disadvantage. I've been in a position where I've struggled with mental health. I've been homeless, where the sight and experience of a police officer causes immense anxiety and fear, but also because of the way that I present to the world now, it doesn't. And I think I want to be able to provide a voice and data to that lived experience as best as I can. And that's why I applied.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Commissioner, I heard the latter part of your question I didn't address at this time, and I'm sorry I didn't complete that. Especially at this time, my knowledge base of understanding police directives, understanding the studies of what it is that's in accountability, those years bring me back to making sure that as part of this committee that I have that type of knowledge to help move forward in reading through and helping to bring out the information that we as a committee will work together toward and understanding what PSEP was formed for the settlement.
Thank you, Pastor, for bringing that experience to this board. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. So at this time, it looks like there's no one else in the queue for questions. So we will need a motion in order to continue this, and we'd be looking for, and I would entertain a motion to to refer the appointments and reappointments of members to the Portland Committee on Community Engagement. Sorry.
Apologies, we have 2 people signed up for testimony.
My apologies. Could our appointees are any of them, I think there are someone here in person, so we'll start with that. Can you please call up our first?
Sure. First we have Mark Porras, he's online, and next we have Edith Gillis. Mark, you can unmute and begin your testimony.
Hi, can you hear me?
You're all good.
Great. Good afternoon, Co-Chair Kanal and Councilors Murillo, Smith, and Zimmerman. My name is Mark Porras. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm with the group Portland Cop Watch. Thank you so much to the appointees for showing up today. That was very powerful. We're glad to see that the city's getting the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing back up to its full strength of 13 members for the first time in a while. We have no objection to any of the 5 new members, the return of Pastor Weisner, or the reconfirmation of Kip Silverman and Tia Palafox. And we're grateful for the service of the members who've completed their terms. We're also grateful for the inclusion of the appointment departure list, which includes the full board membership along with the date of each community member's appointment and their term ending date. Some of the statements in the appointees' bios and statements of intent stood out. Caitlin Davidson wrote, "When governmental bodies share only parts of a story, the community eventually finds out what was hidden and trust is broken." Andrew Hopp wrote that his goal is to help strengthen the connection between community experience and institutional decision-making. Faraya Vasquez Potter is committed to working objectively and respectfully through conflicts, contributing to an atmosphere of inclusivity and transparency in our public systems and advocating for equitable policing practices. Dr. Vanessa Perry wrote that systems, whether educational, medical, or law enforcement, must earn and sustain the trust of the people they serve. And youth appointee Fasika Bekele wants to help move Portland toward a broader and more holistic vision of public safety, one that recognizes the role of housing, mental health, and community support alongside law enforcement. We wonder how the relationship between police and the community they serve might change if the Bureau posted bios and statements of intent for each of PPB's sworn officers. Biographies of Chief Day, Deputy Chief Jovic, and the 3 assistant chiefs are on the city's website, but they don't interact daily with members of the public. We've seen the harms caused by masked, unidentifiable federal agents and how it's nearly impossible to hold them accountable when they abuse their power. Local law enforcement should strive to be the exact opposite of that. Why shouldn't the public know more about, or really anything about, the folks who are sworn to serve and protect? One requirement for applying to PPB is to submit a personal history statement. Perhaps the transparency displayed by PSEP during this process can be an inspiration for the Bureau to begin opening up too. PSEP is an important, if not the most important, avenue for community members to provide feedback on how they want or don't want to be policed. Our perception now is that the city and the US DOJ are ready to be done with the settlement agreement. We support codifying PSEP to ensure that they can continue working towards their mission of achieving equitable policing, which exceeds constitutional requirements and meaningful community engagement with and trust in PPB. Two recent PSEP efforts that we appreciate were the listening session on the death in custody of Damon Lamar Johnson and PSEP's recommendation to leave PPB's exculpatory evidence directive alone. We appreciate the participation of the Metropolitan Public Defenders who educated the community on why it is necessary for the state, including PPB, to turn over all exculpatory evidence to people accused of crimes. It is disappointing that the Multnomah County District Attorney chose not to accept PSEP's invitations to explain his reasoning behind wanting to receive less information about potential impeachment information regarding Portland police officers, and we hope PSEP will continue to work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Edith?
Hello, my name is Edith Gillis, and I know of absolutely no reason to disapprove of or disagree with or defund any of the applicants or the program. I am a strong advocate that we have a lot more involved with our police oversight, that we have more than even was recommended by the board on what we should have. I'm also a strong advocate that we have more about police insurance, that they have to pay their own liability that is not funded by the city taxpayers, and that we have an independent medical examiner, that we have, as with every injury or death within 3 weeks of involvement with a police officer, that we give crime victim services from the city of Portland, and that come from the police budget. I have a lot more suggestions on what we can do in letting folks know about the violence. In fact, wanting posted the types of weapons, the wounds, the treatment, and what they look like from different angles, so that we can identify that and recognize it and provide care for the victims of police crimes. I want to thank these folks that are being so courageous and caring and principled to apply for this. It's hard. You'll be under attack. You'll be discouraged, but don't give up. And let's make sure that we do a lot more than this from now on. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Okay, we'll now return to discussion. Again, I was starting to say we would need, and I'll entertain a motion to refer this item with the appointments and reappointments of members of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing to the full council with a recommendation that they be confirmed. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion from Councilor Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor Murillo. Is there any discussion at this time? I'm gonna say it's a legacy hand here. Oh, go for it. Councilor Zimmerman.
Thanks. I just want to remind folks, it's the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. And I think that's an important part of the mission. There's been some interesting testimony today, and there are a number of police oversight, police accountabilities, independent police reviews, et cetera, but I am looking to these nominees for really living into the role of community engaged policing. I think it's a little troubling that there were testimony today that referred to officers as terrorists, or that referred to, or I guess decided that they're not really city employees. So don't let that sway in terms of your experiences. I was compelled by the stories that were shared today, and we're counting on you to bring you, your family, the people you work with, your neighborhood's experience to this about community engaged policing. And I value what community engaged policing can be in a community. I don't think it starts with some of the things that were said today, not by any of you. But I just, Portland becomes a microphone at times for people, and now that you're going to be one of our appointed advisory boards, you'll sometimes hear from these microphones at times, and I think that you all are bringing what looks like a very positive reason for public service, and I really value that. And the discussions about either your own future or your children's future were very compelling, and so thank you for stepping up. Welcome to the melting pot that is the City of Portland City Hall, and all things come up here. But it's okay to, when something irks you, like maybe what I'm feeling, it's okay to push back on that. And you're going to have some things that come up and irk you. Maybe what I'm saying is irking you right now. But nobody is asking you to drink any Kool-Aid when you serve on a board. We are asking you to bring your whole self to that board and serve with your whole self and serve in a manner that you find to be the most honorable way in which you can serve. And so for those of you that are being reappointed, thank you. I see some members who are also currently members on the board who are here to support the new members. So I just want to give you that perspective from where I'm at and why I'll be supporting everybody's nomination. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there any other discussion? I'm next in the queue. So first, let me say thank you to those who have served that the vacancies created because you left, but we appreciate the service that you put in. Thank you to Kip and Tia for signing up again. And thank you to all of you for being willing to rejoin it, as well as to the folks who applied and perhaps are not in this group, but maybe in a future appointment down the line. I had the personal experience of working with PSEP at a sort of arm's length distance previously in my role at the Community Safety Division, which later became the DCA for Public Safety, that office. And I've seen a lot of different folks come in and really do well when they are taking a lot of the same advice that I think Councilor Zimmerman just gave about being open-minded, being willing to hear out multiple sides of an issue. It's not usually two, is what I found, is that there's usually more than two sides on an issue. And being not only a conduit, but also a person who can assess and listen to that little voice that's telling you something as you're hearing it from a city staffer, whether it's a police officer or an elected leader, as well as from community members who may come and testify. One of the really great things about PSEP is how many people come and testify there relative to some of the other groups around the city. I also wanted to quickly appreciate the other folks who do work for PSEP but are not members. So we obviously heard from the program manager, Dory Grabinski. I know we have City Attorney Sarah Ames, Director of Enterprise Services, Elizabeth Perez, and I don't actually remember your title, Liz, but Liz Taylor, who is, I believe, Program Assistant. Program Coordinator, good. Great. So yeah, there's a lot of folks who do a lot of work behind the scenes to ensure that this entire system keeps going. And I'll just put in a plug to be kind to them, even if you are frustrated with them at times, which is normal. I will be voting yes on this both here and at the full council. I appreciate the work done to build a diverse PSEP in terms of diversity of thought, as well as all of the other ways we look at diversity around the city. And I appreciate that both in the current members and those that will be appointed if this should pass, and I hope it does. Seeing no one else in the queue, we have a motion. It has been seconded. Diana, will you please call the roll? And a vote yes is to refer this to the full council.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Murillo.
Thank you all for your service. Aye.
Canal.
Thank you. Aye.
With 4 ayes, the motion passes.
Great. So this will be sent on to the full council. We are not sure yet when it'll be heard, but I'm sure we will be getting that to you via the staff as soon as possible. December 3rd. There we go. Yeah, thank you for the signal back there. December 3rd, which is a 9:30 a.m. council meeting. So that's a Wednesday as well. All right. Our next meeting of the Community and Public Safety Committee is Tuesday, December 9th at 2:30 p.m. We are expecting, we don't know the agenda yet, but we are expecting several pieces of legislation that may relate to a bunch of different topics. So please keep your eyes open for that. And with that, this meeting of the Community and Public Safety Committee is adjourned. Thank you.